Been a while. I did miss last week. It's the first Wednesday that I missed of the new year, but that was due to power and water issues that plagued a lot of the state of Texas. So I was not immune and couldn't. I think at that point in time we did have power, but I didn't have internet, or maybe it was coming back, and there are other things to to deal with at that time. But yes, Zach is here. And we'll have a guest this week, Connor Eisenmenger, who, if we all are very nice to Connor, maybe he'll be a reoccurring regular guest. So Connor should be here in about 15 minutes or so. And in the meantime, feel free to ask me any questions that you might have. Otherwise, I might just play some etudes and things just to kind of take up some time before he gets here. Here. Yeah, I think the guest format, we had Tuba Dillon, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, or was it 3 weeks ago? It's either 2 or 3 weeks, but I think 2 weeks ago, Tuba Dillon was here, and we had a good time. But I think Connor will hopefully have a good time. For if you don't know Connor, if you want to check him out in the meantime on social media, it's all Connor Eisenmenger or Connor.Eisenmenger. I think you can find him on Instagram as Connor Eisenmenger, and he's a great jazz trombonist, euphonium player. He's a all-around good low brass friend of mine. What exercise should you do to get pedal tones to speak tenor trombone? Yes, and also that etude is basically Ride of the Valkyries. So pedal tones I think are interesting. Um, that you kind of have to. To me, there's a lot of experimenting that goes on, and I kind of think about a few key things when I'm working on my low range, especially, but especially with pedal tones, is to really just think about relaxing and let the instrument do the work and let your air do the work instead of really trying to muscle anything out. In my experience, that's not the most effective way of doing things. Is being forceful and trying to get things to happen. It's not necessarily exclusively a pedal tone exercise, but I can show you what I do on trombone to work on that. Sorry, this is just the best way from. Oh wait, that's the wrong thing. So even I'm not using the PDF. So, sorry, the way the mic's set up, I have to go to one of these PDF things for now. So essentially, what I'm doing is I'm just glissing from first to sixth position, from F to C, F to C, then B flat to F, B flat to F, then trigger F to trigger low C, then pedal B flat to pedal F and back, and then pedal F to pedal C was that last one. And what I kind of find with doing an exercise like that, assuming that you're playing with a trombone with a trigger, you can still do this exercise, but it's slightly less helpful on an instrument without a trigger. But it's making sure that you have a consistency of tone from that ideally that first note is kind of our model each time, and then from there we're trying to keep all of that tone for each note. Each note in between notes, not just like we don't want it to be tone and then covered up tone and then tone again when we get to the end. We want it to be just consistent tone throughout and then back, and then start on a lower note and do it again. So that's an exercise that I like to do that my teacher would always have me do. And it might take some time. It didn't always sound like that, and there's still room for some improvement in there. But yeah, since you have a trigger, I think that's a really good kind of solution or a good exercise to do. But sometimes just isolating the pedal tones. Sometimes what I'll do is something like this, where I'll play octaves. So let's see here. So that sort of exercise is sometimes helpful because you kind of get used to having the note that works and the note that ideally you're more comfortable with, and then you kind of match that pitch, because really having that ear connected to that lower note to me is at least really important, to make sure that it's really kind of my ear is centered, and then I can my ear will help me figure out the mechanics of what I need to do. I often talk about it a lot with analogies of like athletes and things, and since I do watch a lot of basketball. One of the things I talk to a lot of my students about is with low range and high range and things is, if you're Steph Curry, you're really great at making three-point shots. And do you think about does he think about what his wrist does? Probably not. He probably is thinking, I want to put the ball in the basket. And that's his main thing. So, for me, that's the same thing when I'm trying to work on my range. It's that I'm not really thinking, okay, drop my jaw, open up this, make this vowel sound. Those things are definitely real, but those aren't the things that traditionally kind of help me as much. So for me, I really just think about the end goal in mind, and sometimes doing that octave thing is really helpful. How's it going, Zach? Hope you're having a nice taco dinner. But yeah, those are kind of my approaches. But especially I think about my practice sessions being experimentation, or it's like I'm in the laboratory. That's yes, there's so many physical things that are going on, but at the same time, my lips are different than yours. My teeth are different. My oral cavity, my instrument, my mouthpiece, all of those things are different. So sometimes for me, it's hard to kind of zero in on this is exactly physically how you do it when we're all different, playing on all different equipment. So for me, kind of doing that sort of experimentation, and as long as you're not doing anything physically harmful, generally that experimentation can kind of lead to some decent results. So that's kind of how I approach my low range exercises, and sometimes just playing, especially on a trigger, tenor trombone. A lot of times, what I like to do is just play tuba etudes. Like if that etude that I was playing earlier, I don't have this set up well to see very well, but I'll give it a shot. Sorry, that was horribly awkward. But basically that was, those sorts of things, working through that trigger range is something that I kind of, work on a lot. And sometimes just playing some tuba etudes, although, you don't have that low B natural, but you can get through a lot of them. Not every etude has a B natural. I'm assuming you're asking the other Zach what instruments he plays. But yeah, tuba etudes are great, or even just taking like Bordonis is another great example, because that's probably a better example than doing doing tuba etudes that are really technically oriented. So maybe something like this. Realize playing it from memory would be easier than trying to look over here. I usually have this other screen set up, but because of our guest, that screen is being used for that. If I had more screens, I could make it work a little bit easier, but alas. So yeah, that's kind of how I like to approach things. I think Bordonis can be really helpful down the octave, just because they're kind of logical sounding, and they're things that you generally know pretty well. So French horn and trombone, that's an interesting combination. My French horn playing is not professional by any stretch. I had to teaching brass methods, but yeah, French horn is an interesting beast. But hello, Luis, how's it going? But yeah, Connor should be on here pretty soon. Let's see, I'm gonna put the trombone up. I didn't really set up everything to play trombone today. Trying to have everything set up where I'm able to kind of record videos in the back of the room. And initially I was doing some live streaming stuff where I'd be in the back of the room, but I think it's better, even if you can't see the whole instrument, to, see my face and see the facial expressions. I feel like that makes it a little bit more enjoyable. Let's see. What exercises can I do to sound relaxed in the high notes in the euphonium? Yeah, so I think that, that's I think a lot of it's mindset, and just starting, playing melodies and going into the high range. So one thing that I might do is take a simple melody and play it in all 12 keys. It's something I especially recommend when it's like, the holiday season, to take one of your favorite holiday tunes or something when you're like, stuck in the house for the holidays, and you want to practice something, but everyone's in the house and they'll get annoyed if you practice all of your excerpts and things. So I'll take a simple melody and just play it in all 12 keys, and sometimes I'll just, up a half step, up a half step, up a half step, and try to continue that same level of sound and just relaxedness, which is probably not a word, but that sort of thing is kind of what I'm focused on. So another kind of way to work on it is just really making that air do the work for you. The air is really the secret. Yes, to me anyway, I should preface it with that. To me anyway, this changes, there are muscles involved, they have to be able to do it and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, it's all manipulating the air, and we just need to get it where the air can do the work for us. So that's kind of what I think about my high range is done by my air, not by my chops or my embouchure or anything like that. Although I admit that that's not necessarily true. Let's see. Yeah, sometimes when you play multiple instruments, your ranges are pretty similar. My range is pretty similar on all the low brass instruments. If I had to play a bunch of high notes, I'd rather do it on a smaller instrument than a bigger instrument. But for the most part, the ranges are pretty similar. But yeah, and also, French horn is longer than, I guess, if you're saying single B flat French horn, it's the same length as the trombone. I know length isn't the only thing that kind of controls how easy it is to play in the high range. The mouthpiece is much smaller, the bore is smaller, all of those sorts of things. But yeah, let's see. Play slurs in the mid to high range and going up. Yeah, that's another great way to do it. I do a lot of slurs of arpeggios and things. Like one of the exercises that I do. So something like that, where I'm just, obviously you don't have to start that high or anything, but, just doing glisses like that. Paul the trombonist says that instead of scrunching for high notes, the more relaxation and delicate precision like ballet, life-changing advice. Yeah, I mean, it's yes, you might be able to muscle out a note or two, but it almost never really sounds good with that sort of approach. And letting your air do the work is really what I'm kind of all about. But yeah, also I probably should get rid of that pop-up name thing that shows up every single time I switch to this camera or switch to this scene, but it's here. So let's see, maybe I'll play. Oh, our guest has arrived. So it'll take me a second to get things set up, but we should be good to go. And I'll have to wear my headphones because I didn't plan to. My in-ears are somewhere else, so it'll look slightly less helpful. Connor, we are getting things ready for you. So, and I know this looks really silly, but I've got a portrait monitor that's in landscape mode for this purpose, which is not ideal, but it works. So let's see here. So I can hear Connor, which is good. Let's see if the whole world can hear Connor. So I'll cut to you by yourself, I think, first, because then I'll pop up with your info and stuff. Your socials.
My credentials.
Oh, I meant to do by yourself. Boom, it worked.
Wow.
So at least on my end, it looks like your audio is coming through. So if you'd like to, Connor, go ahead and introduce yourself to the 8 people who are very excited that you're here, I assume.
Sick. I'll do that. Hello, everyone. That I cannot see because I'm just talking to Zach from my perspective, but I'm glad that you all are here. My name is Connor. I play the trombone. I grow my own hair. I teach public school, and I'm living in Seattle, Washington.
You also play
So yeah,
euphonium. Don't forget about the euphonium.
I also play euphonium. It is officially on record that I am a more accomplished euphonium player than I am a trombone player. That's where the stats are right now.
Funnily enough, I have higher, official accolades as a euphonium player as well compared to tuba or trombone, which again feels very odd. My pocketbook says otherwise, but
Yeah, dollars per note. I think trombone is always going to win,
right.
but we shall see.
But yeah, it looks like
I,
people are able to hear you well, which is good.
it's great. It's nice to be seen.
Yeah, everything is. So if anyone has any questions for Connor or for either of us, we're happy to answer them. We didn't totally plan this out as far as what our goals and intentions are with this live stream. So a little bit of help from the people that are watching is always kind of nice. So. But yeah, maybe Connor, one thing that you could tell everyone or talk a little bit about is just like maybe where you went to school. I think people mostly know where I went to school and all that sort of stuff. But maybe you can, what you majored in, what your path so far.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely talk about that. So interesting. I've got a fun education that really took me to a lot of interesting places. I started off where I was born, which was in Kentucky, and I got a music ed degree while I was there, basically because I didn't really have any other plan and I was too afraid to audition to any big schools. But I had a lot of fun doing it. I really, really enjoyed doing the music education track and still teach music in the classroom to this day. I am a cert, which is fun. Highly recommended way to go. Getting the old cert. So I did music ed at Western Kentucky University,
Go
and
Hilltoppers.
then go Hilltoppers. Yes, yes, that we were topping hills since day one. So that was fun. And then while I was there, it was great. It was not a gigantic school, so I had some time to myself to practice, practice, practice. And because of that, I got to go to UNT, to North Texas, which is where I met Zach. And
Well,
we met.
technically that's not true. If we want to,
That's not true.
not to sharpshoot you,
Okay.
but since you like to point out that I don't remember when we first met, so as some of you may know, it's not something that I talk about on this channel very often because it's not super relevant. But I'm also from the great Commonwealth, not state, but the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, and so
Semantics.
Connor and I didn't know each other well. We're a year apart and in school. And Connor went to private school and I went to public school, so there's a little bit of a difference there. But we did technically meet at All State Jazz auditions when we were, I believe it was the year that I was a sophomore, you were a junior. Is that correct, or junior and senior?
I think it was sophomore, junior.
Because we were both at both of those, but we only talked one of those times, or according to your story.
Yeah, it's disputed whether this story is canon or not, but I distinctly remember meeting someone that, in my foggy memory, this is going back to like 2007 or 8. This would have been fall of 2007, I think. Or no, it doesn't
That's
matter.
not correct, but we don't want to date ourselves. It is not. It is
Anyways,
not that year. It is maybe a year around there. Maybe not.
I distinctly remember talking to a hot-headed young brass musician
Hot-headed.
who was bragging about their facility on both the tuba and the trombone, and I think they dropped the name of the fancy school that they went to while they were having this conversation with me. And I want to say that young, strapping lad was none other than Mr. Lowbrass himself.
Right. With that sort of introduction to that story, I think I'm gonna have to vehemently deny it. I think that's my only solution there to keep my credibility. That never happened. It never would have happened. That's clearly not canon, as you put it. That's in the books that don't count. Only the movies count.
All right.
And only the edited movies now count, right? But anyway, but yes. So that allegedly may have happened. Who knows exactly how it happened? There was no record. That was before closed circuit TVs. So there's no way to kind of go back and figure it out. So we'll just have to trust Connor at his word that I was a hot-headed young bass trombonist at that time, I believe. The first year I did all-state jazz, I auditioned on bass trombone when I was a sophomore. And then when I was a junior and senior, it was all tenor trombone at that point.
That makes enough sense.
But yes, that event may have happened. But yes, we did kind of, meet again and meet, really for the first time when Connor was starting his master's and I was kind of finishing up my undergrad at the University of North Texas. We were both jazz trombone students at the time. So, those are the good old days, so to speak. But yes, we're both from the great Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Commonwealth.
Little trivia, Connor. Do you know the other Commonwealths or any of the other Commonwealths or how many Commonwealths there are?
I don't think I'm comfortable on air guessing the
What
other
the Commonwealths?
Commonwealths because I have absolutely no idea what they are.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, someone
I remember that distinction though.
Someone in the chat can figure out what the Commonwealths are, which probably to people who aren't from these 4 Commonwealths, it's probably news to you that that's what some people call states in certain Commonwealths. But that's a little off topic. We do have one question. Is it safe to feed your new trombone a tuna melt? And someone corrected it and said tuba melt. A melting tuba may be okay. I would say a tuna melt with as a fish sandwich is probably not wise to feed your trombone. But do what you'd like.
I don't know. I think I have a counterpoint to that.
What's your counterpoint?
I mean, if we're talking about the safety of the instrument, specifically its lacquer, a melted tuba is going to do a lot more damage to the lacquer of the trombone, or even really the integrity of the inner slide. Depends on really where the tuba or tuna melt is going. And
I would imagine if we're talking feeding it, it's going straight through the mouthpiece into the receive, into the lead pipe down the slide. That would be my assumption. Okay. But maybe blonde curly boy, if this curly gentleman is still around, maybe they can clarify their question. But
it remains to be seen.
But yes, we also do take more serious questions. If maybe not the most serious of questions, because it's all low brass related. That's only can be so serious.
Serious is a relative term, right. But we might even get into the area of what might be described as pedagogical.
Right, there you go.
That could be fun.
But yes, so then Connor, you did your master's in jazz trombone at the University of North Texas, and then what? As if I don't know, but
yes and no. I didn't do a performance degree at the University of North Texas, so I never gave a jazz trombone recital. I gave a lecture recital.
Because you're a learned scholar.
Oh yeah, book learning. But that was fun. And I did it. It was kind of funny. I had every chance to change back into the performance track.
I've looked at the degree plans before. They're very close.
That's a difference of a couple of classes. But by the time I started taking some of more of the pedagogy-based classes, I realized I was practicing about the same either way, whether I was planning to switch to performance or pedagogy. And then the books that we were reading in the pedagogy classes ended up being really cool. It was a ton of fun. So I'm glad that I ended up doing it, even if it was kind of happenstance. But yeah, so I finished up there, and then I went to Chicago to kind of swap places with Zach, which seems to be something that I like to do in my lifetime.
Look who just joined the chat. Brian Fincher, imagine giving a lecture recital instead of an actual recital.
You know what? I can't imagine how anybody could sleep at night knowing that they gave a lecture recital. I couldn't imagine anyone else other than me that maybe did that in their time.
I
Brian
think
Fincher.
I think Brian is just upset that because this is not high brass U, he is not allowed on this channel. Um, under any
Yes.
circumstance, is Brian to be allowed on this channel?
I mean, we get a lot of questions about that. All I can say, is just really shed your pedal tones, Brian. If you just keep working, if you don't really have the note relaxed, then you don't really have the note in your register. So I would say to Brian, just go ahead and keep practicing, man, and keep shedding, and you might get on here one day.
Right.
We'll see.
By that bass trumpet, Yamaha actually they did make a couple bass trumpets. I think it's actually just two. I know that's the instrument that Denson Paul Pollard plays. It's like he has one, and then there's one other in the world of like a C rotor bass trumpet that Yamaha made. So Brian, you might consider purchasing one of those instruments, and then maybe you can be allowed to be on this channel.
Yes, we'll have to see. I know for a fact that his lecture recital was about high notes.
I mean,
So he might not even.
as all trumpet players, like to believe those are the only notes that exist, and that's how we judge them exclusively, is just by the highest note they can play, and not all the other ones. What is a lecture recital? So it's somewhat more common these days for, depending on the exact degree, or I guess your exact major. But it's really just it's mostly a combination of a lecture and a recital. Sometimes they could just be lectures, but most of the time when people refer to a lecture recital, there's kind of a component of talking about something. You might say, I'm going to talk about the compensating valve system, and you might play some etudes that demonstrate the compensating valve system on euphonium, and then you might talk about it a good bit. So, but yeah, there's some overlap generally. Did you play on yours? I know for the classical ones, that's how the lecture recitals work, but for the jazz ones, how did that work at UNT?
There's less of a focus on the playing side in that there's no requirement that you would play a tune. It's usually to the advantage of the subject material that you would do something that is centered around playing, so that you could, you would be able to argue whatever your point is more effectively through performance. And a lot of people did that, even people in my graduating class. I didn't do that. I only played piano, and not very well. I only know music theory piano. But what my lecture recital was on, just to give you an idea of what those are about, it was at the time there was a book that's still a great resource, but it was super, super kind of in vogue in more K-12 circles. It's called Teaching with the Brain in Mind. Eric Jensen, I think, was the author of that. And so I took some of the concepts from that and tried to kind of cross-reference it with some of the techniques for memorization in Jerry Coker's books and Jamie Aebersold and David Baker.
Jerry Coker and Jamie all of those three have written a book or two in there.
Yeah, quite a few. So that wasn't arduous at all. But anyways, what I was looking for, there's these two types of things, and you can break down memorization of tunes into two really big skills that are super, super important from what I found from that book. And that's semantic memories and procedural memories, which is a really, really fancy way of saying semantic memory, putting a label on something, i.e. bebop scale. Procedural memory being going through a tune, playing all of the roots and having the kinesthetic knowledge of whether it's your hands or your fingers or your slide, and attaching that muscle memory to the semantic label memory. And so every single three of those authors kind of had a facsimile of that sort of technique going on in their books. And so what I tried to do with my paper was add some behavioral science credibility to what was really just hey, here's how you learn tunes. It's no, actually, there's really some significant brain science going on there. But that's kind of what was going on.
Gotcha. So it's kind of akin to just being a visual learner, an auditory learner, a kinesthetic learner, but kind of more about wrapping all those together and that sort of thing.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I was gone by the time you did that. Otherwise, I would have attended. And I feel like that. Did you live stream it? I can't remember.
No. I think that I recorded it on video camera
Direct SD card.
Yeah, it was not glamorous.
And then
But I know that my professor,
on VHS
or
and Disney DVD.
former trumpet professor Mike Steinell, has that SD card somewhere, I'm sure. If you asked him really nicely, you could probably watch it. But I mean, I think we just got the cliff notes were there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out my topic for my lecture recital. Really should get on that, but such is life.
Yours is probably more playing specific if it's attached to your performance degree.
Right, and it's pretty clear as far as it has to be, because there's a lecture recital option, there's a lecture option, and then there's a strictly paper option. And each of those has a different length of paper involved with, which, believe it or not, I chose the shortest paper, not because of the length of the paper, but of course because I wanted to play in the lecture. So it's kind of lecture recital, lecture, or just paper. Is kind of the way it's structured. But yeah, so we'll get that figured out eventually. But yeah, it looks like Brian is saying that piano is demonstration. And there should be some sort of demonstration in your lecture recital, which does make sense. That since recital is in the word, the term, otherwise it would just be lecture.
It would just be a lecture,
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I also didn't say hello that Brady's here. Brady's one of the regulars. We got a few regulars here.
Hey, Brady.
You definitely peaked everything doing that, but that's okay.
Sorry.
We do need to tweak.
Yeah, I've got this thing massively.
We also need to tweak the settings in Discord at some point. I taught my first lesson via Discord today, and I learned. I was taught some things by my student Danny, who is a Discord aficionado. So
nice.
he had me tweak some settings, but Discord definitely is better than Zoom for anyone who is curious. But yes, so yes, we'll tweak those audio settings at a later date. But yeah, one other thing that might be interesting to some of the viewers out there is maybe you telling us you don't have to grab them if it's, I don't know where your trombone cabinet is, but if you want to just talk through some of the instruments that you have that might be interesting to some.
Yeah, the trombone cabinet is in another room.
That's kind of what I figured.
You're in luck. So I might just have one right here already.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah, you know this one very well. Do you want to talk about it first? Because you probably know more about it than I do.
Well, that's maybe. I don't know if I know more about it than you do at this point. So the trombone that Connor is wielding is one of my only regrets. No, not one of my only regrets, but I went up to the Edwards factory in 2009, I want to say. I think that's right. Maybe I think 2009. I'm pretty sure 2009. I went up to the Edwards factory and picked out that trombone that Connor is holding, and then I was stupid enough to sell it to him, which I do somewhat regret. But I wasn't using it. It wasn't my main instrument anymore. But essentially, it's a 508 bore nickel slide with a rose brass bell. Was it a yellow brass crook? Or not crook, neck pipe, I believe. I think that's right. Or is it nickel? I can't even tell anymore.
Wait, which part are you talking about?
The neck pipe, the gooseneck. Is it?
Oh yeah, the curly Q at the top.
Nope, that's not the neck pipe or the gooseneck. It's
which part is the neck pipe?
Opposite the bell on the bell section.
Oh, this thing.
Yes.
The old pepperoni.
Is that silver or is that lacquer, or is that yellow brass?
Yellow brass, okay. Right there.
It's a little hard to tell.
Yes.
I couldn't.
I know this because I need to get something to put over it because I'm definitely wearing it out a little bit.
Yeah, you tend to do that. Everyone has different, kind of levels of acidity in their oils and things, and some of us are a little acidic. And
my nickname in college was the human orange because I am simply so acidic. To the point that my mouthpieces, I only have the gold ones, which is not recommended. It's not cost effective at all. But that's just the reality of what I have to do because I just eat through it until there's nothing there.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a problem. But yeah, I would get some. I mean, there are lots of things you could put on there. You could do the Zach Steele method and just go duct tape or no, I think he had electrical tape. That's what his thing was.
Over the neck
Yeah,
pipe?
I wouldn't do that, but one could do that.
That's a Tony thing.
Oh well, maybe that's who suggested that he do that. I'm sure they're not the only
Yeah.
two people in the world to have done that.
It's tricky because you have to, the way that they do it, it looks really, really good, but it's not the way that I would instinctively put electrical tape on anything this thin. My natural inclination would just to be what would be easiest for my hands, which would be to go boop, 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 and put multiple strips until it's covered and then you'd be good. But the way they've done it, you can't even see where the seam is because they've gone, you know, vertically with the tape. And so I didn't even know what it was. Like I had been looking at the trombone that Tony had off and on, and it just looked like some sort of special aftermarket sleeve.
Interesting.
But yeah,
Yeah, what I would have thought to do is to wrap it around. Like every time I use electrical tape for some electrical
right.
project, that's the way I would have done it. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I would probably. I mean, my usual answer would be to put some leather thing on there, but try to not deal with leather these days. I'm sure there's some sort of cloth item that you can put on there.
Coconut fiber.
There you go. But just curious, does the sound quality of playing on Discord sound better than on Zoom with high fidelity music and other options enabled? From my very limited experience of teaching exactly one lesson on Discord earlier today, I thought it was better, and my student also thought it was better. And it was also nice because it didn't. Sometimes the sound more often would the video lag than the sound. Like the sound was really kind of rock solid for the most part when we had that lesson. Occasionally the video wouldn't be great, especially because he was on his phone with Wi-Fi. But to me it was better, and I think that it's better. But again, I'm pretty new to the Discord game. But I have in talking to my student today after the lesson we had. A little he gave me some insight on Discord, so I'm thinking about starting a Discord server for this channel. I'm not sure who would be interested in that or how I will go about doing that exactly, but I think a Discord channel for low brass you may be in the future. So to a Discord server near you, I guess.
There you go. I'll be a mod.
Yeah, you can be a mod. We've had some requests to be a mod for this one. So far, we haven't really needed it. We mostly stay on topic. We mostly are, mostly we're all friends here. There occasionally are some rogue individuals, but for the most part, we're pretty good at staying on task in this realm.
Yeah, it's a cozy enough operation that I think you can kind of man it yourself for now. But it's fun to have, like timekeepers and people taking care of chat. That's for anybody who's teaching. I don't know if anyone in here of the 8 watching now are teachers, but that's a great way right now if you're online to keep attention and engagement in your classroom, especially with like 3rd through 5th graders having like timekeepers and chat monitors. They love having those jobs. It's fantastic.
Oh, I mean,
Anyways.
I remember being just wanting to be like line leader or caboose in those grades. Just like all I want to do was be in charge of turning off the light switch during a fire drill. That just like having that level of responsibility, being the last one. It's just like, okay, now Zach, you get to turn off the light switch because you're the last one. It's just like, got it. I won't screw this up. There's no, I'll make sure that everything's taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. Giving jobs is definitely a good thing for that age group.
Oh man, I can imagine the jobs you would be if you were in my music class. You'd be the one that would be like, all right, Zach, like you're in charge of picking up all the drumsticks, and then you'd be like, I'm done, what do I do next?
Yeah,
like, you sit, you're done.
Yeah, my sister, who taught for a good while, she would always tell me when she had a student who's just like me, and she's like, I hate it, it's no fun. But she definitely had some feelings about that, but I can't imagine I was easy to teach.
You require agency in your learning process. That's and you need that in other parts of your life as well. if you were in my classroom, you would be the one helping me in the beginning of the year establish classroom rules, things like that. That's really good for the little Zach Marleys of the world.
Yeah,
It's like, all right,
we need
you know,
goals. We need projects.
yes,
Can't
there you
exist
go.
without a project.
No, as
Um,
evidence of low brass U existing and this live thread.
right, it's a project to have. But yeah. So again, keep the questions coming. Connor and I share some knowledge, but I think it's also nice that we have maybe not conflicting, but complementary knowledge bases of various things, and certain things we might agree perfectly on, other things we may have slightly different ideas, but all opinions are valid.
Yes, all opinions are welcome and safe in the LBU thread.
Right.
Even if some of us remember some things differently than others, that doesn't make anyone's memory worse or better.
Well, we all have our own opinions on that, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
But yes, there. Who can remember. Especially because one of those all-state auditions, I remember it being like really like unsafe to drive too. I don't know if you remember that.
I know exactly which one you were talking about. It was in Lexington.
Yeah, I
Yes.
remember my mom being like, I don't want to drive you to this, and it's just like, well, but I have to. It's all-state auditions.
Yes. Or maybe it was in Lexington both of those
I
years.
think it was always at the same school in those days, but I could be wrong.
I think it might have been. I remember it being dangerous. It was one of those situations where they were planning on inclement weather for a long, 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 long time, and then it did actually happen when they said it was going to. Which I'm
Right.
not going to say is rare for Kentucky, but I remember, huh, okay,
Right.
yeah, there's ice on the road. Yes, I remember that because my band director, who I still am very, very good friends with and had made a big impact on my life, but also was really into like road food for any trip that we went on. And I think I ate a hot ham and cheese sandwich from Hardee's on the way to that audition, which I
Ah.
cannot recommend and I will not recommend to any students.
Yeah, I get a little greasy before an audition.
Don't do that. That's the second dumbest food that I've eaten before playing notes that mattered
I will
in my
say
entire
I
life.
will say there is some real like thought that should go into what you eat before you play, especially very important performances or auditions or what have you. One thing that I learned is I was taught this by my band director actually is that tomato-based products will actually tend to dry you out. And
Yeah.
tomatoes are in a lot of things. So you think about any pasta that has tomatoes or something like that, and it's like you have pizza, and then you realize, oh, I'm a little dried out, and no one likes playing a brass instrument when things are dry. Hello, Mr. Anonymous,
Yeah. Hello. Greetings and salutations.
also a regular. Um,
Ah,
we've got a few really strong regulars that are often here.
yeah.
Um, Who needs slide grease when you eat something greasy beforehand? Just kidding. Yeah, yeah. Please just be kidding. But also, even if you brush your teeth before, it's good not to eat something like that right beforehand. Just
I didn't know that about tomato product.
yeah.
I guess.
I heard that one time from my band director, and I remember, um, you know, I remember having to deal with the repercussions of that, and I try to avoid that.
Yes, it's always been grease and salt have always been what I've been wary of. And the day that the light bulb clicked for me, there's actually really, really tangible recorded evidence of this was the recording session day one of the 2 o'clock lab band, the year that I was in it. And we had food provided for us, which was totally sick, but it was awesome. When I say sick, I mean awesome. It was great. It was pizza. And ever since then, anytime that I have like salty chops where like I can't play well because I ate junk food, I call it pizza chops. Because that day, lunch break was right before we had just finished playing like the tune. We'd recorded like the tune that I was supposed to blow on, and then we had lunch break. And then the first thing, like before everybody came back, they were like, "Connor, when you're done with your pizza, go blow over this tune so that we can hit the next thing." And I was like, "Okay." and it was just bad. I am not happy with the notes that came out. Well, we ended up like piecing together something manageable, but like it was like 3 tries of like a solo break that I just completely biffed, and Rodney Booth coming over the intercom being like, yeah, Connor, like we're gonna try that one again. So just go ahead and relax a little bit. It didn't work. It was worse every single time.
That's funny. Theater feller, hello. We've already established your existence. You've commented on a lot of things, but I will say hello to you anyway. And Harrison, you consider yourself a moderate regular. I think Harrison, I think that you don't comment that much. You may be a regular at watching, but I don't think that you comment quite as often as some of the other regulars that I might be more accustomed to. You have to remember, you can't see who is watching these things for any vantage point, really. You know that you're watching it, but unless you comment, unless you like, comment, and subscribe and click the bell, I can't even be sure that you're here. Zach says, don't ever eat anything sour before playing either. I don't think I've ever done that, but that is probably a wise idea to avoid. Back in middle school, you were a Sour Patch Kid type, and we'll say it did not help your tongue. Someone named a band Pizza Chops. That's good. Yeah. I don't eat. I don't really eat a lot of things that are like really sour. I mean, occasionally put lemons in something, but I'm not just like. I was never a Sour Patch Kid gummy. To me, it's like if I'm gonna eat candy, it's like it's chocolate. I never really understood why people would eat candy that wasn't chocolate. I know people do, and I know people really like it, and it's not a knock on those individuals. But I was always more of a fan of chocolate.
Different strokes, different folks. I can understand it. Also, absolutely, let's start a band called Pizza Chops, and I will join that. I will audition for Pizza Chops right now.
I don't know if you're Pizza Chops material.
You don't know. Check my recorded portfolio. It begs to differ.
Yeah, Mr. Anonymous used to think it was a good idea to eat before playing until his tuba broke.
It broke.
Yeah, and what way did it break? I mean, it's definitely. Did it eat away at something eventually? Because that definitely can happen.
That can happen.
Yeah, I mean, eating beforehand is just directly beforehand is never a good idea. Realistically, you should brush your teeth before you play pretty much all the time. I know we're not all great at doing that. But also another thing with that too is one of the reasons why you should oil your valves as often as you do is it also is a cleaning agent. So the oil kind of helps flush some things out. So theoretically you should oil everything before and after you play every single time, every single day. I fall short of that standard occasionally. But I did, however, just get part of my shipment of oils that I needed. So I've got a handful of Monster oils that I ordered on Amazon recently. # not sponsored. But yeah, I got three heavy. I don't have autofocus on, so you can't. If I move it closely, you can't see it, and then you can't see it back here. So really there's no point to this. But I got some oils, and my tubas need oil. So and everything needs oil, but these are all for rotor valves. And I use the heavier oil for the older instruments and the lighter oil for newer instruments. I'm not really sure where that line is, but I think that my C tuba might be transitioning into the older instrument category at 19. So, it's 22 years old at this point. It's getting there. Just finished college and not sure what's next. But yeah, definitely my F tuba at 1972 needs the thickest oil possible, basically. Let's see.
Theater Feller made a good point about brushing your teeth before playing and whether or not we can access mouthwash. Hey, that's it's a good on you sort of thing. A lot of people keep like a whoopsie toothbrush in their trombone case or something like that, especially like when you're in college and you're studying music and you just got it. You just come from the dorm. Maybe you had to eat on campus. I will say one thing, like an equity thing about that. If you're in high school or middle school and you are worried about, deteriorating the inside of your instrument or anything like that. I know that I was not worried about that, but if you are, we can't guarantee the amount of time that you have for lunch available. So I would say definitely prioritize nutrition before like, buzzing off from lunch early to go, clean out your horn or do something like that. But yeah, maybe a quick toothbrush in the instrument case, or even if there's no time for that, just a trip to the water fountain or maybe just water at lunch. That will go so far in saving the integrity of your instrument. And it's not like a sody pop's going to kill it, but I can tell you, as someone who has lived through a sixth grade band experience and someone who has taught in the sixth grade band experience, that the amount of well, we don't want to get into the details of that. I'm just going to say that it
It can get
better.
gross.
Yeah, it's not good. So I would say, like, if you're in band in high school or otherwise, I would challenge yourself maybe to like stick with water at lunch,
Right.
for your liquid there. That will save so many chem cleans and problems down the line.
Connor, we're getting one comment that our voices are slightly mismatched. I turned mine down a little while ago, but if you want to turn yours down just a smidge, I think that might be good for all involved. I need to put compressors on here. I forgot to do that today.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah,
but maybe split the difference from what you just did.
Sure thing. Now we're up a hair.
Yeah, I think that should be good.
Cool.
Definitely some compressors would help some things, but I didn't do that today. I suppose I could do it on the fly, actually. But let's see. Zach oils once a week at most. I would say my rotors are very well behaved. Yeah, see, that's kind of your once a week is better than most for sure. But what I would just my kind of teacher response to that would be that, especially with rotor valves, but with pistons too, the valves working well is not necessarily the same as you oiling them enough. So what kind of to think about is like with the car, right? You don't get an oil change once your engine just fails because you didn't do it, right? You do it regularly because you know that if you don't do it, something bad will happen. And that's the same thing that it should be with your instruments, is that you're oiling them before there's a problem. If you're oiling when there is a problem, which I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, Zach, but just in general, if you're oiling once there's a problem, it's too late. Or not too late, but it's not the right thing to do. In my opinion. Let's see. Brassens is the best way to promote oral hygiene. Yeah, brush those teeth. Usually oil my valves once a week. I never thought it would clean your instrument too. Yeah, it doesn't clean the whole instrument, but the valves are sensitive. And it's just one part of it's liquid that's going in there, but it's also kind of a viscous, or it's a thicker liquid than most of the things that you're probably putting into it. So it has the tendency to kind of clear that out and break down some of that, because if you can imagine, oil is a little bit more kind of I don't want to say aggressive, but it'll get through some things a little bit more than your saliva might if they're left to fight each other. So, but yeah, I think I'm actually going to put on a compressor and be a good technological.
Yeah, you should do that.
I've been meaning to do that. That's just one of those things that I forget about doing. But I do have. I'll just do a vocal compressor preset and assume that works pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably
while you're doing
good.
that, I can talk a little bit about oiling valves and horn maintenance and my little take on that. You don't want to know probably the last time that I oiled my valve trombone valves. Actually, that's not true. It wasn't like it was that long ago, but it's definitely I'm taking that thing out of the case infrequent enough that usually, like, by the time I'm taking the valve trombone out, it's like, okay, it's probably time to change the like oil these and give it a wipe down and everything.
Well, if you're not using it, like if you're not using it very often, the ideal way to do it is to, put thick oil on it when you're not going to be plying it. And theoretically, you should, there's a little bit of an incentive to pull it out every now and then so that you're able to oil it, because it can't sit forever without oil.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I would I would tell you and everyone to do is if you have one of those instruments that you're not playing every day, it's not your main instrument, as valve trombone is not your kind of bread and butter necessarily, although I don't know if your social media presence reflects that. But anyway, it's good to kind of get it out just to oil it, even though that seems like a monotonous task. It's kind of important to do. But if you oil it right when you get it out of the case, you're probably not doing too much harm to things. The big thing that we'd want to avoid is metal on metal. So if we pull it out and it's bone dry, the valves might move, but you might be metal on metal, which is really not how we want any simple metal machine to function. So
can't have it.
Right. But I did put compressors on both of our voices, and the levels seem to be pretty consistent. I might boost them just a hair. Because I think I'm using OBS to do this, not where the compressors are in Pro Tools, but maybe I'm peaking now. Should be doing a little less. I feel like I've said this before, but I think the red starts a little bit too early on OBS. Like it makes it seem like things are scarier than they actually are.
Err on the side of caution, I guess, is their
right
way of thinking.
Which, makes enough sense.
That's fine.
But yes, thank you for the input on the sound. Is it Vitor? I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, I'm sorry. But thank you very much for your assistance. There's just, especially with this sort of format, there's just like so much to contend with. We've got videos, like if you saw the screens that I have set up, it's kind of ridiculous. And there's a lot, like I have my Connor screen here, which is a TV that's in portrait mode, like physically in portrait, but landscape so that it works well with how I'm capturing this. And I've got a screen that's just the audio processing. I've got a screen for PDFs. I've got the screen that is split between OBS and monitoring YouTube chat. It's a lot, but we make it work. But yeah, so I think that oiling is important. It's one of those things where it's very, very important that we're all taking care of it. And we all fall short from time to time. I talk about oiling as if coming from this moral high ground of I am perfect with oiling everything. But that is simply not true. There are times where I'm like, oh man, I didn't oil this instrument. But I try to go through and oil everything, especially on the instruments that I'm playing all the time, because I want to make sure that I'm, basically cleaning it out and handling all of that stuff well. But yeah, it's definitely an important thing.
Definitely. The frequency, definitely. Preventative maintenance, I think, would be the term for the frequency that you want to go for with oiling stuff. I can say I still need to take it in to get it fixed, but I moved recently, not that recently anymore. It was over the summer, and my large bore tenor with a Thayer that was already a little bit fussy sat in its case longer than it ever had since I bought it. Mm-hmm. And it still is a little bit upset with me for I haven't been able to get it back to the happy place that it was at pre-move.
What oil are you using on it?
I don't remember. One of the monster rotor thingies.
Yeah, I'd be curious, especially if you're using the light one, maybe switching to the heavier one might work out better. And especially,
I think I am using the light one.
Yeah, I might recommend the heavy one, because did you ever look up the serial number of how old it is? Or do you remember?
No, I think I was told mid-90s on Craigslist.
Yeah, mid-90s, I would probably be thinking heavier, because just over time the tolerance is going to get it's going to get looser in there, and that heavier, thicker, more viscous oil is going to kind of clean up a little bit more of that, or take up more of that space that the thin oil won't
that makes
do
no
with.
sense.
So right. I think about my instruments with rotor valves, the newest one is 2010, so it's 2010, 2006 maybe, 1999, 1972 are all the different eras of those. And again, that 99 one is the one that I'm thinking needs to kind of transition. Also, especially for a tenor trombonist, and we don't always use that valve as much as you don't need it all the time. Is the reality. So sometimes that valve sits just because of that. If you're not really conscious about moving it, I would probably again recommend the heavier oil. But that's kind of why it's one of my kind of nervous ticks that if I've got a valve, I try to move it a little bit just for longevity's sake and dealing with all of that.
Yeah, it's just such a tricky thing.
Right. But yeah, the heavy oil, like with this, I got 5 of these, and I got 3 heavies and 2 lights, if that puts it in perspective.
That does.
So
I'll give it a shot, and I'll report back the next time, and we'll see if it's any better.
Right. And you never know. It may not be perfect either, and maybe it needs to be clean too. I mean, there are lots of other factors, but I don't imagine it'll work worse. The only thing with heavy, theoretically, is if it's a really tight tolerance in there, that heavy will be kind of gummy. It'll be kind of slow, and that's obviously not what we want. But I would be surprised if that was happening on a mid-90s instrument.
I see. I want to pivot and go to another discussion here because Vitor just posted a really interesting question that I think is in the context of brass playing. In this exact moment, I'm icing the base of my thumb. Can you guys discuss a bit about pain, or better, how to avoid it?
Yeah, so Vitor is not someone that I haven't. Maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think you've commented much before. So I guess my first question would be, what instrument do you play? Because that might affect some things. All low brass instruments can have some issues with ergonomics. But maybe Connor, you want to take some of this question?
Man, yeah, I can talk about pain until the cows come home. As far as like physical pain is like when holding or playing an instrument for way too long. I've had my own personal experiences with that, and also my partner as well, who so I guess I'll start with mine first. I think I remember getting back pain underneath my shoulder blade as early as the 8th or 9th grade from playing trombone, just because I'm a wee little lad. There's a saying in my family tree from people of my family that we are skeletons with gelatin. So we're not known for being a particularly muscle-bound people. So it happens to me naturally that I will overstrain myself in a lot of ways. And one way that I've done that, and I still think about maybe modifying this horn to this day, is getting a counterweight on this horn, because this horn is pretty well balanced, but it definitely leans towards the front heavy side.
Right.
This one's not enough to be a problem. Horns that I have played,
and that whole horn is relatively light, which helps.
That is a tremendous help. I mean, it pales in comparison to like even like a mid-size like large bore tenor,
right,
or even like a medium bore or something like that. So it's small, and even some small bore horns that I played for a long time, specifically a super olds. If you're gonna play on a super olds, they're super cool and they're very, very pretty. Get one with a counterweight or just slap one on there, and it's just gonna make your life so much easier. That thing was super front heavy. I think it was like maybe the bell stuck out farther or something like that in the slide. I don't really know.
That sounds right, because it's a very narrow horn.
Correct.
Like all of it is very narrow, so it's going to be the more narrow horn, like the slide and the bell section. The more narrow it is, the longer it's going to be. So it maybe was protruding more bell side, maybe it was protruding more slide, tuning slide side, or both.
Right.
But yes, that definitely. I went through the same thing. So on the trombone that I play for most of my work is a Bach 6, lightweight slide. It's like the Bill Watrous model, the LT16M. And that horn, I'm not sure what it comes with stock, if it comes with a counterweight, but when I started playing it, it did not have a counterweight. And that lasted all of like a couple of months. Once I started playing it regularly, I was like, I need a counterweight. And what I will say, we're professing our fondness for counterweights. Counterweight doesn't necessarily always solve the problem or even make it better. It could make it worse. In both of our instances, we were trying to solve the problem that the bell was bell heavy. It wanted to turn your wrist this way when you're holding it. It wanted to because it was so heavy on this side in comparison to this side. Most of the time, a counterweight is not going to make any of that worse. But I think it's worth mentioning that, don't just put on a counterweight and say it is now more ergonomic and everything is better, because it may in fact not be the case. But yeah, I had a similar issue with that instrument, and basically all of the small instruments that I play, they have counterweights, which I think helps. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And for me, like with euphonium, I still have wrist problems because of euphonium and maybe bass trombone, or maybe the combination of the two. But for a while, I had to almost completely stop playing euphonium, because it just my left wrist is still. It's not a problem in day-to-day life, but if I overextend it, like if I were to do some push-ups or something, I would notice that my left wrist is not the same as my right wrist. Nothing debilitating, but enough where it's not ideal. And it's been better for me since I got this quick horn rinse wrist strap here, which has made it a little bit easier. But the euphonium is not really an ergonomic instrument.
I would argue that the trombone was not. I think it's Doug Gio that says the trombone is not designed for the human body, or with the human body in mind. Or no, he says the bass trombone is not designed with the human hand in mind.
Definitely not the bass trombone. And also, I just reached for this because this is literally my. I don't wear it as much anymore, but I do have a wrist guard. Not wrist guard, but a wrist. What is this called? A wrist apparatus. We'll leave it at that.
A brace?
Brace. There we go. Words are
brace. Hard. So Vitor says that he's playing on a tenor horn. It's aged beyond 1970, a little bit old. If I mean that to mean like a tenor trombone of that year.
Well, maybe. A tenor horn could also refer to a smaller baritone-looking instrument, sometimes also called an alto horn. But some might refer to a tenor trombone as a tenor horn. But
true.
I would guess that tenor horn is alto horn in this conversation, but maybe I'm wrong. But
either way,
go ahead.
But yeah, I would say for tenor trombone, one of the things that helped me when the position of my hand was going too far forward, the thing that fixed that for me was Yamaha sells a little leather strap that can go around your hand that threads around the lead pipe. But it sounds like the problem is different. The base of the thumb, that tells me it's either the bass trombone problem where the horn is pulling you this way, and that's usually fixed. Don't larger horns usually have like people get like the bullet brace that's like an add-on that helps with that weight distribution?
Like baritone.
Yes. Okay, so that's it.
Right. So I'm familiar with a tenor horn, but I'm definitely not an expert. So I don't necessarily know where haven't spent enough time with the tenor horn to be able to say this is exactly what goes on. But since it's similar, so you're talking about the base of your thumb, and I'm wondering if it's the base of your right thumb. Trying to put it in frame, doing something like this. That might be the case. And if that is the case, baritone, euphonium, or alto tenor horn, I try, if I have to, I'll maybe use my thumb like that. But for the most part, I'm supporting the weight of the instrument with my left hand, and then I'm just able to, I really don't even. That's really just where my thumb rests. It's not really what's doing all the work. So yeah, maybe clarifying if it's your right thumb or your left thumb, that might help us even further. Let's make sure we get some of these other comments before they get buried. Zach said, for me, the part of my hand under the thumb is always pretty red and inflamed after practice, since fifth valve is designed sort of sketchy. So, Zach, you're talking about tuba. So one thing that I will show here is my tuba thumb ring, or lack thereof. So we've got this beautiful scar. I don't have a thumb ring because neither of them on my F or my C were placed really well for my hand. and I would argue humans' hands in general. So I got mine removed. I still have them somewhere in my storage area or my thumb rings, but I got them removed. And actually, with my F tuba, it had the left thumb. It had a left thumb operated fifth valve. When I got it, so it was 4 over here, and then left thumb by like the 4th valve slide. And as an American, we can't use our left hand on tuba. We have to make it right hand operated. That's very much a European thing. I mean, obviously you can do it either way, but I'm used to having it all 5 in one hand. So I had that trigger, the mechanism for that 5th valve. It was custom made for my hand, which, believe it or not, helps. But yeah, it was a great thing that I got done at the UNT's repair shop, and they had to make a custom spring, so the piano technician made it. So it was definitely a very involved process, but it was pretty helpful. So let's see. Chinese copies are like that, but it's not. Wait. It's you're talking about the 5th valve on Chinese copies. I'm not sure how those differ exactly. German trombones, example, are front heavy according to Ian Bousfield. Yeah, it's been those are instruments that I've tried at trade shows and things, but I've never spent a weekend with a German trombone. But I do know that they tend to be heavier, especially they tend to have a lot of copper in the bells, which copper is heavier than zinc. So if you transition more towards copper, that's going to be the case. Mr. Anonymous, most of my pain came from my terrible posture. Yeah, I sucked at back problems when you're not even an adult. Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to take care of yourself, because, I mean, you might not be able to play for your entire life if you do stuff like that. And just in general, it's better to be, more comfortable. Doing things like stretching and stuff, it seems kind of, maybe silly to us brass players that's something, we need to be thinking about health and wellness. But there are a lot of tuba players who I know who are in their, 50s and 60s that have real physical ailments because of playing the tuba. And like you think about it, it's actually not that surprising. Look at that instrument. It, of course, doesn't work very well. Do you want to read some of the other comments, Connor?
Sure. And I will say that while we're reading that comment about posture, I'm going to go ahead and stand up and use my standing desk as it's actually intended, and probably not sit on this stool like I have been for a while.
Just had to flex on everybody like that.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I was sitting like a schlub. I mean, I've got bad stool posture, and so we made the concerted effort to get the standing desk, only for me to sit on the stool in front of the standing desk with worse posture than I already did before when I was sitting in the regular chair. It's all just kind of silly.
Yeah.
Anyways, so fun fact, Doug Yeo lives in the same city as me. He's the trombone professor at Wheaton College. No way. I didn't know that. I thought he was somewhere. It's been a long time since I've checked up on where Doug Yeo's teaching.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that, but that's not super surprising, because he retired from the Boston Symphony, and then he was teaching at Arizona State for a while. And I think that, he was retired when he started that gig, basically, so that's not super surprising. He's one of those people that kind of looks younger than he is because he's always taking care of himself really well. He's definitely a big health and wellness sort of person, from what I understand. I don't know him personally, but maybe we'll have him on the show at some point.
Maybe. I'd love to actually meet Doug Yeo sometime. I've really been a big fan of his for a long time. In fact, he's probably one of the only reasons that I actually play music to this day, because I didn't know that there was such a thing as trombone solo literature when I was in high school. No one told me. And so I was gonna audition for school, and my my trombone teacher that I had taken a couple lessons with, who was a great bass trombone player, who for some reason didn't tell me about solo literature, which is I don't know, you'll be fine. It's Doug Yeo does those cello things. And so I was wow, cool. Yeah, I'll play a cello suite for my audition. And I just practiced it and was wow, this is getting absolutely nowhere. And then I played it unaccompanied for the panel at Western Kentucky University, and they were wow, that was way more work than you actually needed to do. It still sounded so bad, but the fact that you made a concerted effort to get through it tells us that's proof of concept that you can technically play something, so you can come to college here.
Right.
So shout out to Professor Yeo for that one.
Yeah, and especially like I think that most of these people on this stream are younger than us, as I would imagine, and the amount of resources that they have access to compared to what we had when we were probably at the same stage in our development. Doug.io was like one of the only websites that existed. I'm not sure that it's changed since then, but it was like, wow, this is a professional who's telling me things about pieces and instruments and things. It was so helpful, and I think both of us were kind of starved for that sort of thing, because there are a couple people in town that knew, but you weren't talking to them all the time.
We were just barely on the cusp of really living in what we now understand to be the age of information. Like, I would say, like, our youth was sufficiently digital in a lot of ways that it is similarly digital now, but it wasn't quite in like in the means of like access to information. It wasn't quite as much public knowledge that you could just go onto YouTube and learn anything that you wanted.
Right.
Back then.
Yes, that definitely wasn't a big part of it. So let's see. My left hand feels awkward after holding up the trombone after a while due to my pinky stretched in an awkward way, due to my hands being wee small. Yeah, I mean, all brass instruments kind of struggle from this of they're designed for one size of hand. Whatever that instrument is designed for, a size of hand. Is that your size of hand? Maybe, maybe not. Is your hand being? I have pretty massive hands. I can palm a basketball. I don't know how to do a size.
So you're gonna make fun of me for bragging about my standing desk, and then you're gonna drop that you can palm a basketball.
Well, but it's relevant for this discussion in that my hands are actually too big sometimes, and things are uncomfortable because I have to scrunch my hands. It's the same problem. In general, that's not as much of an issue. But yeah, there are certain things that you can do with a trombone. One, just in general, choosing the right one. Maybe getting a trombone that doesn't have quite as wide of a slide. Certain brands and certain models have wider slides, which will make it more or less comfortable potentially for you to hold the instrument. You can also get like little rings installed, so you see those occasionally generally on more beginner and intermediate instruments, because the assumption is that the younger student may have smaller hands, and you don't have to wrap your finger all the way around. You can go underneath, which maybe is a little bit easier. So there's some modifications that might be able to be done. I
had no idea that was what that was. I've definitely seen that before on trombone slides. I could use that because I myself have. I'm being swallowed by the cuff of my shirt. I have tiny little hands. I have short little fingers on comparably small little hands, and so it feels like I'm just driving a tractor or towing a boat every time that I play my Bach 42. It's just massively huge. And I played on the Zeno, which is kind of like a Con 88H for a long time. And that one has a little bit, the slide bracket is a little bit thinner, and that felt really comfortable in my hand. I like the 42, but that just, if ergonomics is a consideration, that's like, you could do a lot worse.
Right. What a lot of people consider the 42 to be is a bass width slide. But that's there are lots of trombones that are like that, because the sound is going to change with having a really wide slide. It's not just a physical thing. Like, it does change things, and that sound kind of became in vogue a little bit. But that doesn't make it comfortable. And tubas have a lot of issues with that, especially piston valves, because you really need to press them right in the center if you want them to really work well. And especially the like Meinl Weston tubas, those are really big piston valves, and the pistons, it makes sense for them to be that big logistically for making a tuba, but for someone's hands ergonomically, it's not usually actually that great. So great either way, but not both. Talking is difficult, but let's see. Theater fellow is watching this while scrubbing his trombone in the bath. Yeah, I actually cleaned out one of my trombones in the bath recently. I need to do it to a couple others as well. IMSLP, or wait, yeah. Vitor is saying in the left hand. Yeah, so I think with the left hand thing, again, I mean, the tenor horn is a smaller instrument than a euphonium, but you hold it basically the same. You might try getting this wrist strap. Maybe that will help, because what I imagine is that you're trying to hold it and support it here, and really kind of working too hard that way. Whereas this kind of puts the weight on a stronger part of your hand. So that might be something to try. I'm not sure that it'll work well, but I'm pretty sure you can still buy these on Amazon. Quick Horn Rinse is the brand. The Quick Horn Wrist Euphonium wrist strap, I believe, is the full title.
I have a question about that, actually.
Yeah, I have an answer potentially.
So I saw a still image. I don't know if it was how this person was actually playing their euphonium, but it was a euphonium player that I respect that plays very, very well and is much smarter than I am. They might have been just getting ready to play. It was just a still photo of them standing on stage, but they had, their valve top was right here, and then they were kind of not holding the bell like lower than that, but like on that side, like
so like
this
doing
sort
like
of.
this sort of thing.
But like lower, like towards the bottom. Yeah, it was almost like an ice cream cone. Is that a thing?
I don't know that to be a thing, but there very well could be some physiological advantages to doing that, or maybe even just mixing it up with those two things, because I'd imagine that you're stressing different muscles, different joints by holding it this way. This doesn't feel ergonomic to me, but maybe because it's like pronation and what's the other one?
Metaphase, anaphase, telophase.
Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
That's all I know.
Right. That's we're definitely stepping a little bit outside of our our full knowledge base. We're not experts on that necessarily. But let's see. IMSLP is the best sheet music library website. Yeah, it's a great one for anything that's public domain, which is all that you should be downloading off the internet anyway.
Right.
But that's not necessarily how everyone lives their life. You're not gonna lie. The first time I ever heard of Doug Yo was from watching a YouTube video of the double tonguing MRI. Gen Z, by the way. That is actually helpful information. That's kind of a funny way of doing it, or
That's a sick video. I only very, very recently saw that video. So
yeah, I'm trying to remember when that
news to me.
But it's not a new video, right? It's a pretty old video, as I remember.
In fact, I think it might even
like early
be a
YouTube,
video,
right?
I think it looked like it had an older upload date, and just like the way that the video is produced, it looks like it might have been made for something else and then later digitized.
That makes sense. Yeah, it definitely. I know I've seen it, but it's been a while, and I don't remember how long of a while it's been. But yeah, I saw that video back in elementary school. Let's see. Kryzen instrument accessories choices in the Philippines. Yeah, I mean, especially right now, availability of things just in general is not great in the entire world. But yeah, I mean, especially with like certain accessories, sometimes it's easier to make it yourself than to try to source it someplace. I mean, I think you have to realize that most low brass related things is not actually a good business decision for anybody. Most companies are losing money. Like, for example, Altieri, the case manufacturer, the gig bag manufacturer, they stopped making their trombone and tuba bags because they were just like, well, the person quit, and they stopped making them. And it's like, if that stopped you from making a product, it wasn't very profitable. If it's not cost effective to train someone to make them, then you weren't making a ton of money on them, if any money at all. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, nowhere in the world is it easy to buy a tuba. You can't just walk into mini stores or trombones. That's not very, that's not a very easy thing to do. But yeah, it's tough, and tariffs exist. I'm not really super familiar with the specific issues with the Philippines, but I know, I mean, obviously very different region of the world, but I know specifically with like certain South American countries, there's like super expensive, like in Brazil, there are like super expensive tariffs, and you basically pay like double for an instrument if you buy it there. So
wow.
And I know a lot of people, not that I would advocate, or not that I'm an advocate for cheating any sort of tariff system or anything, but I know a specific horn teacher that I was aware of would every time they went to Europe, they would bring an empty French horn case and come back with a French horn, either for themselves or for a student.
They shall remain nameless, I'm sure.
Right. Even though they weren't the easiest teacher for me to deal with, but yes, I will still keep their name out of my mouth, as it were.
I will say another comment to piggyback off of this, just as like an equity of premium, like the identity of premium instruments. There was a time not long ago from now that half of the Army Blues trombone section was yard sale horns, or at least yard sale horns were in the regular circulation of their daily drivers. And I think it was lead and second or lead and third. Don't quote me on that one. But I remember hearing that one time when I was at the ATW, because those people they're just walking around talking to people, and they were talking about, I think making fun of us young people with
custom horns
custom horns that we can't even play.
Right.
And then they were like, we just ripsticked it on stage for you guys on something that I found in somebody's yard. So it's one of those like what is it, like the tool versus the craftsman
right
thing?
Yeah, a bad craftsman blames their tools.
Right.
That's definitely an oversimplification. I'm not saying that I don't like playing on higher grade instruments, and I do have some not as high grade instruments. Like my euphonium is not the top tier instrument, but it's definitely it works. But there are days where I wish I had one that was 8 times the price. But hello, Tuba 365. Tuba 365 for your information. Connor is very much a regular.
Hey.
Sorry, he's late. Connor as a low brass player? ? Yes, Connor is a low brass player. You want to give Tuba 365 a 20-second rundown?
Yeah, Reader's Digest.
There are probably 13 new people online at this point.
Probably, yeah. So we can just say it again really quick. I'm a jazz trombone player. I am currently based out of Seattle. I was in Chicago as a freelancer before that, and Zach and I met in the old lab band circuit at the University of North Texas. So that's where I come from. But mostly jazz trombone. I flatter myself and play and call myself a large bore tenor player, mostly on Christmas and Easter. But yeah.
And your euphonium stuff, that's.
And euphonium, yeah. Euphonium,
valve trombone,
valve jazz trombone. I would consider what I play on valve trombone just improvised music. I don't even know if it's cool enough to be jazz or Black American music, but I would say that I am exclusively a player of jazz and Black American music on the euphonium. I cannot, with a good conscience, say that I am a classical euphonium player.
But with valve trombone, you also exclusively play Italian opera music with it as well. I'm just kidding.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna have a valve trombone, even though it's not a rotor valve trombone, it still counts.
You might be impressed by my William Tell. You just wait.
On the valve trombone though.
on valve trombone, no, not at all.
That's as
you'll be disappointed
as intended.
Yeah, I know. And if I had, it would be fun to try to work up William Tell on the valve trombone. I think that would be a super kick. It would definitely be more in tune than my regular one, but I would be accidentally double tonguing all of the notes. It would go because the valve would flip and then I would tongue in the wrong spot. It would just be a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not meant to be played on that instrument, but it's not meant to be played on any instrument, really. Let's see. Hello, David. How's it going? I don't know. It's sometimes with certain messages, it's hard to tell what, Matt Miller is saying no way to, because there's a little bit of a delay in both directions. But awesome. Yes. Got a recital tomorrow playing more so. Awesome.
Sick.
That's a great one. You want to see a clarinet?
How does that one go? Sing that for us a little bit, Zach, so I can remember.
I assume they're talking about the Morceau Symphonique that we all know, but there's another Morceau Symphonique, but that's kind of beside the point. Yes, give me 1 second. I'm not. There's music on the screen, but it's not actually that. That's the David. That's my bad. Definitely got
10
those backwards. That's totally, very much let's scratch that from the record.
No, that's 10 points for me. You need to get
That's-
another graphic and put 10 points on my side of the screen.
We'll give you, it's just like there's a show on ESPN, Pardon the Interruption, and whoever wins the whole show gets like their moment. So you can have, wait, where are you? There we go. You can have your moment of me playing just blatantly the wrong piece. But also Carmen Marley has joined the chat.
Carmen Marley!
But that one is. It's been a minute.
What?
Right? Morceau Symphony? Is that?
That's rope parts, my friend.
Oh, goodness. What? Now I've just got everything backwards. I know.
This has been the roast of Zach Marley.
Wow. Which?
That's okay.
I know. I know the main section is. To be fair, I've never performed. Also, that was probably peaking the microphone because I was using the speaking microphone. So, rip headphone users.
I see.
But yeah, no, it's been a minute on some of those. To be fair, they're all French conservatory, Paris conservatory pieces. I'm sorry for getting them backwards. To be fair, I've played all of those pieces, but I'm not the expert on classical trombone repertoire, which we just all found out. I know we all thought I knew everything prior to this moment. Unfortunately, I can get some details. But honestly, even with like jazz standards and things, getting the name right with the tune is like one of the hardest things for me. Like I legitimately struggle with that. Like on my Saturday gig, the trumpet player called Up Jump Spring.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
It was Up Jump Spring, and I was like, cool, I know that one. It's the one that's like the A section's in F, and then the B section's in G flat. And then he started playing, and I was like, that is this tune, And I don't know, I think it would be a good gag to like record an album of like all tunes that are like basically the same name, like just doing anything with spring, like Springtime can really hang you up the most. Or is that too many words, or is that the right amount of words? Spring can really hang you up the most?
Spring can really hang you up the most.
Yeah, not Springtime. Yeah. Let's see. What then? Up Jump Spring and Joy Spring.
Joy Spring.
There's another one, isn't there?
There's way more than that. I know there's a chapter in David Baker's Creative Approach to Practicing Jazz where he says when you're memorizing your tunes, a creative way to group them is to learn in 1 month all tunes that have the word spring. The next month, all tunes that have the word April. I would not recommend this approach. That's a really cool thing.
Or all the tunes that have a remember. I remember Clifford.
Yeah.
I remember Clifford. I'll remember April. I remember you. Remembrance.
Remember.
Yeah. Remember.
Remembrance.
Rembrandt. They're all sorts of.
Yeah. We can go on.
But Connor, you have a specific question from Tuba Man before we get too far off on a tangent.
Oh, yes. So what was your craziest gig? Oh, man. I don't know if I have any gigs that are particularly crazy. I have some gigs that were probably dangerous to my health, a lot of those living in Texas, and a couple of strange, maybe unique projects. I'll talk about the dangerous one. The most dangerous gig that I've ever played was right when I moved to Texas. One of the first things that I did was I played a hot air balloon festival outside in Texas in August. And if you can imagine wearing a suit, playing a trombone, dancing around on stage with a cover band during a hot air balloon festival where they're all igniting the balloons all around you. And I remember thinking like, I don't belong here. Like this is not safe. It was way too hot. That was awful. Then most interesting other than that, coolest thing that never happened was I was on a recording session for an album that was supposed to go to the King of Thailand as a present. and then it just never happened. Like the project flopped; it didn't get off the ground. So
Can't,
that was
can't
fun.
win them all,
Can't win them all.
or even some
I
of
have
them.
one other one. Another interesting one. Nope, that's it. Oh, yes, I remember. This is the most evil gig that I've ever played that I regret was Joel Osteen's birthday party. I can't remember when or how long ago that was, but that was a wild dude. I think he said something like he was turning like something 74, maybe 80 or something. I don't know what he was birthday, but he was like, "Oh, I'm going to be 100 and so and so and so age." And we're like, "Oh man, that's like terrifying to think about." But anyways, that's a conversation for another day.
But yes, and we've got some other comments from my partner. In fact, Carmen says, "Now play the other one." Beautiful, because Carmen on her senior recital did play the less common, more so symphony, because there are two of them. But yes, I don't know that one. I've only heard it the once at her senior recital in whenever that was. But
You don't remember every song that your partner played on her senior recital?
Well, I remember that she played that.
Well, that's true. But you
That's
can't
that's
sing
literally.
every note? Come on.
Yeah, I can't sing every note, but I could go get it. I'm sure we have it in our music folder somewhere, But yes, David, I'm sorry for definitely playing the wrong pieces.
We got there eventually.
We did get there eventually. Definitely.
One thing that I
go ahead.
If it makes you feel better, we're talking about recitals with partners. I was not there for my partner's senior recital, of course, and then I didn't go to her graduate recital, even though we were both in school at the exact same time.
But to be fair, you were not romantically involved at this time, I believe, correct?
We absolutely were. I was trying to be romantically involved with her at that time. Then she said, "I am not going to go on a date with you. I have to study for my oral exams." Because she had those the same semester that I became romantically interested in her. And so we didn't go on any dates because she was too busy studying. And then the one day that I should have shown up and been like a supportive musical partner, I had to go direct to 7 o'clock and play like San Francisco tunes with them, which was a blast. It was great. So it was no hard feelings. But yeah. I remember thinking like, wow, like that was probably pretty important. I got the recordings though. It sounded really good.
Yeah, that's good. I'm not sure that I was there. I don't think I was there, but I could be wrong. I'm sorry to your partner who will remain nameless, because not everybody wants to be named on this. 11 people could
there are dozens of us
could track down her social security number or something. But you did hear it here first. Zach thinks all French conservatory music sounds the same. Yeah, it's just the problem with all of those pieces that they were learned in such a small time period. There's like a 2-year window where obviously I didn't learn all of them. There are other ones that I don't know yet, or haven't really learned. But I learned like one every little bit, and it just they all tend to run together because they have. To be fair, they don't all sound the same, but they do have similar features because their purpose was the same. They were used as jury pieces for everybody, and they have similar, sort of tricky little things that you might get, tripped up on. But you guys both date musicians or are married. Yeah, we don't make friends outside of our circle, I guess, is another way to look at it.
Yes.
And both of our partners are brass players as well. So we didn't reach that far away.
Nope. Oh well.
Right. But that's a good way to know that the person will put up with your noisy brass noises.
That's true.
That's definitely a very important thing.
If they themselves also make incredibly loud noises, then that kind of like evens the playing field for that sort of discussion.
Right. Just no one gets upset about the loud noises.
Yes.
But good. I think we'll call the show there. Time flies, especially having co-host makes this really easy. But we have been doing this for like an hour and a half. So
wow,
I think
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, the total stream is 100 or an hour 100. I guess it is 102 minutes. Is that right? No, 112 minutes. Math. But an hour 52 minutes, but I had a 10-minute buffer before I started the actual thing. So, but yeah, so we'll let everyone have the rest of their evening. myself will be watching the Lakers play the Jazz. It probably is starting at this very moment. So got to get to that. But yes, thanks to everyone who watched this stream, and I think we're gonna have Connor on next week if he will allow it, and we'll maybe keep this thing rolling. But we might change the time a little bit. Connor, as mentioned a couple of times earlier, is not in the same time zone as I am and as many of you are, but I know there are people all throughout the world that watch this. Or not all throughout the world, but with 12 people, I know that someone already mentioned that they're in the Philippines. That's definitely not in the same time zone as where either of us are in. But this starts a little bit early for Connor on the West Coast, and it might be more convenient to start a little bit later, or potentially different nights. So we're still kind of figuring out some things. We'll answer this one last question. I'll let Connor answer. What's a good jazz bone?
Best jazz bone is the one you have in your hand. But aside from that, if you want to talk about like something to step up as like a premium, you can't go wrong with anything with the word king in it, especially if it's followed by a number. If you wanted to go even fancier than that, you could get like an Edwards or Courtois or something like that. Bach has great 36 and the 12 are fantastic.
I'm just going to leave out the 16 since I play a 16.
All right. What do you? Yeah, I couldn't remember that number.
16.
And then Con, yeah. All those H's, just let's get them in here. Play them all.
Yeah, I think, not to go off on a tangent since we already said our goodbyes.
True, we did.
But, I think that Connor's first point is it's the one that you have, is that's a good starting place. That may not be the best horn for you forever, but you can play jazz on any trombone or any instrument that you have. You're playing on a school trombone with the bells cracked. Yeah, that's probably not perfectly ideal, if I'm being honest.
I've been there before, though.
Yeah, but you might be able to make it work. Tape up that crack and go with it. But yeah, a lot of manufacturers. It also jazz is vague. It sounds very specific, but it can be pretty vague in that. If you're more on the big, some people when they say jazz, they mean just strictly small group improvised things, and some people might be saying that they're only in it for playing in big band. And not that those trombones can't be the same instrument, but a small group horn basically can be anything, and a big band horn also can be anything. But depending on what you're trying to do with it, there's definitely the right tool for the right job in some ways. So in general, if you're playing a big band, especially if you're trying to play lead or something, I wouldn't recommend the largest horn possible, although it can be done. But that's definitely, maybe we'll lead with that question next time. So same bat time, same bat
I'll
channel.
chat with that one next time.
Unless we change the time, then it won't be the same bat time. But we'll see. This time kind of works, but maybe it's not perfect. Yeah. So we'll try to get it to be kind of smoothed out and regular. But thank you all for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye, friends.